Okay, got it. Okay. Hi, my name is Carolyn Greer. I was inducted into the Far West Athletic Trainers Association Hall of Fame in 2007, and also was recognized by the NATA as a most distinguished athletic trainer that same year. I spent most of my career at the University of San Diego. I was there for 40 years. All right, so I was born in New York, and my dad was a corporate executive, and we ended up moving all over the country, primarily on the eastern and west coast. So I actually lived in Connecticut, New York twice, Eugene, Oregon, Menlo Park, California, and then down to San Diego. So I would say my formative years, junior high and high school, were Menlo Park, California.
What made you decide to get into athletic training? How were you introduced to it?
Okay. Yeah. I went to San Diego State for both my undergrad and grad degrees. As an undergrad, I was an intercollegiate gymnast, and so I participated on the gymnastics team and actually started as a math major. And around my junior year, I thought, this isn't fit me at all. Those were years, although the athletic training room was a co-ed situation, we really didn't go in there very much. But I had a fall in gymnastics and I fractured my sternum. And so I went in, and Bob Moore, the head athletic trainer, an ATA Hall of Fame member, he was the one that evaluated me. And so as he was palpating my sternum, I was looking around at the facility, which was not very impressive compared to today's standards, but I was watching the athletic trainers doing things like evaluating, doing rehabilitation and PNF and taping and just all kinds of things that just kind of sparked my interest. And coincidentally, a couple weeks later, I went to a football game at the stadium. And everyone's watching the game, but I was watching the athletic trainers on the sidelines. And it was really neat to see them taking care of the athletes, going out on the field. Some returned to the game, some did not. But I really thought, wow, this is really cool. So this is back in the internship days for athletic training. So I went to Bob Moore, and I was in his class at that time, but never really watched it. And I said, can I be a student trainer? Just like that. And we were allowed to say it like that then. And he said, sure, yeah, start coming around. So I was in the ATR for about probably 3 weeks, and Russ Cagle, his assistant athletic trainer, came up to me and said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, Bob said I could be here. And that's how I actually started in the internship program at San Diego State.
Were there other students at that time? Or was it
Yes, there were other students. There was another female, her name was Patricia Fort, and she was ahead of me by a semester, I believe. And then Carolyn Smith was a newly certified athletic trainer. And then Russ Cagle and Larry Roberts was in there also. So it was, a smaller staff than they have now at the university, but there were. And there were a handful of students that were in there.
Cool.
One of the things that was unique about Bob Moore was that he was way ahead of his time. He was doing things like, he called it science-based, now it's called evidence-based, but he would do things because the science supported it. And he was way ahead of people in terms of how he progressed individuals in rehab, how we used proprioception, and before all of this was standard, he was in the forefront. And a lot of facilities that we would go to, they were basically, he called them Hummers, so they did passive modalities, but they didn't do things to get the athletes better. So he was really good at evaluating their deficits and developing a program to get them back to their game. And just very, very skilled at evaluation and emergency care, and it was really neat to be around that. He also was the athletic training room at San Diego State was one of the very first on the West Coast that was a true coeducational athletic training room. Most, if they had an athletic trainer for the women's sports, that was usually a separate facility, or the women took care of women, the men took care of men, and it was just very separate. But he thought that, he's looking at who are the best athletic trainers. And he made sport assignments based on your skill versus you're a male or a female. So that was, me traveling with men's soccer and with football, and getting those opportunities were rare back then to be on the sidelines as a female.
Yeah.
So
How would the other side, the other schools that you play with, would they react differently to seeing a female traveling with the teams?
I don't remember it that much as a student because I thought it was normal. Where I started to notice it was after I started working at USD. And I would be there, the only certified athletic trainer for our teams. And the question was, is the athletic trainer here? Or then trainer, who's the trainer, And so that's when I noticed it more. Or referees and umpires would ask me why I was out on the court or the field, and I'd be kicked off. And really interesting times, that you had to really establish yourself as, no, this is my job. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like Bob definitely the more.
Yeah, Bob was progressive, but he also would always do the right thing. He didn't care what anyone else thought or pressure from athletes or coaches. He would always do what was morally right and safe for the athlete. And even now, I don't think that's always 100% the case. I got certified in May of '78, and that summer, I worked really just a lot of part-time things, like summer camps and all of that. And it just so happened that the Buffalo Braves got relocated to San Diego, and they became the San Diego Clippers. And so the NBA changed my life, because the athletic trainer at USD got the job with the San Diego Clippers. They needed a 1-month, 30-day interim athletic trainer to fill in while they searched for the permanent replacement. And so I was available, and so I took that risk, and I was the interim athletic trainer. And I kind of joked that
interim athletic
at USD. And so I kind of joked that I was, that they misread the letter, that it said 30 years, not 30 days, so that's why I was there for so long. So,
gotcha. So
yeah.
It was kind of like one of your first.
It was my first full-time job.
Yeah.
I was just certified. So
wow.
If you figure May, and then all of a sudden I'm a head athletic trainer with football at a university, it was daunting, to say the least. And I just remember my first day on the job was a football game. And Larry Roberts said, oh yeah, be there at 4. And so I'm there at 4. He goes, okay, well, here's your keys. I've already ordered supplies. Your team's getting ready, and these are your students. Good luck. And he left. And I was like, oh no. I was scared to death. And I was like 23, so I was very, very young, obviously inexperienced, incredibly cute, of course, But it was a big day.
How did you even develop the program that USD has today? Like, where did you all really start?
Okay. One of the things Bob Moore was not great at was administrative duties. And so he depended on his students and grad assistants to do a lot of that. So although I wasn't in charge of that area, I dabbled with it. And when I got to USD, there were no files on the athletes. There were no pre-participation physical exams. Our team doctor needed more experience, to put it lightly. And so when I got there, my first year, it was just trying to keep my head above water. But I knew there were things we needed to do. And so at the end of my first year, I contacted orthopedic surgeons that I knew in the San Diego area through my work at San Diego State University, as well as others that I thought may be interested. And I put out, hey, I need a team physician. I need physicals. I need X, Y, and Z. And so I did get response, and we ended up.
Did you write letters to them, by the way?
Oh yeah,
nowadays
I typed my own
email.
letters.
Okay.
I typed my own letters.
You
Yes.
just mailed it out. To
And
all-
mailed it, mailed it out. Yeah. Back in the day, we didn't even have a copy machine in the athletic department. So you didn't save copies of a lot of things because you would have had to go on campus and use the copy machine and come back. So, yeah, it was. But Dr. Bill Curran, it was the one that was really interested and loved the university, and he was the one that helped me develop the pre-participation physical exams. I had an idea what I wanted on my forms. He helped me with, let's make it better. We started our, group physicals for the athletes, and that was a big part of that. The other thing was the insurance and billing side of it. There was some claims that were in a folder in there, and it was trying to sift through that, but then learning. I knew a little from San Diego State, but learning how that whole process worked, and I felt like I really took ownership of that. During the academic year, or from August 1st till June 1st, I had no opportunity to get to meetings unless they were here in San Diego and I could go over for a little bit. I just couldn't do it. And then June, July, it depended on if it was out of area my funding, because my first year at USD, I made $10,000 for 10 months. And so, compared to today's standards, yeah, that's bad. But even then, when your take home is $732 and you had an apartment and had to pay all of it, so that funding was a lot there. And the thing that people don't realize, the younger generation don't realize now, the advantage you have with learning. Anything you need to access is at your fingertips. That's all you have to do. Or even FWATA being virtual, and you can listen to the lectures, maybe if you can't in real time, but you can do it over a week because you can set aside an hour a day. When I did my master's degree, you went to the UCSD biomedical library and you got your articles from journals that were paper journals. And so now you do your med search, and so the educational opportunities are unbelievable for athletic trainers now. But one of the big things, and Bob was very instrumental in, you got to go to the national meeting if you can. Okay, got to go to the national meeting. And I remember taking my certification exam, and there was a portion of it called the oral practical. And in the early days, they were big questions like explain and demonstrate how you would evaluate a semi-conscious athlete and what you would do. So, I mean, that's a whole lecture, right? Or, explain and demonstrate 3 ways to assess quadriceps strength. And so they were, it was much different. Then they kind of transferred that kind of testing to more psychomotor, like show me a Lockman, So in those days it was really hard. When I took the exam, I had to go to Arizona to take it. There was a written, you filled out your little Scantron type thing, fill in the bubble, and they called you out for the oral practical. Now when in '78, maybe 5% of all certified athletic trainers were females. And so I walked in to this room for my oral practical, and there is Dave Knoppel, the head athletic trainer at UNLV, and Todim, the head athletic trainer at University of New Mexico. And then they had a proctor and an observer and a model. And then on the ground was Annie with a helmet on, right? So intimidating to start with, and I'm 5'2", So I remember Dave Knoppel being just stone-faced, tough, asking the questions. You couldn't ask for clarification. It was, you could ask them to repeat the question, like the whole thing. And then Todeem was, just the smiling, athletic trainer there. And so you tried to focus and only look at the Todeem. But the first convention I went to after that was in Vegas. And two things I remember. I remember one, walking down a hallway and seeing a sign, Women in Athletic Training, and there was probably 6 people in there, okay? But I wanted to go to the program, so I didn't go in. And in hindsight, that was probably a mistake because there were so few of us at that time. And that goes back to, don't miss an opportunity. But the other thing was Dave Knoppel, the one that was really not very user-friendly in the oral practical. He's walking down the hallway and he sees me, and when you're certified, your badge is a different color than as a student. And he comes up to me and he looked at my tag and he went, "Congratulations, I knew you could do it." So it was just kind of, I felt I was part of the family, with that. But educationally, the opportunities, the level of education has just exploded. Back then, the coursework we took as undergrads, it was maybe 3 or 4 classes. So everything else you had to book learn, okay, to do it because there was no internet. You couldn't just ask the teacher for the PowerPoint presentation. So I think that the learning opportunities and the evidence-based practice that they've done with the NATA, it's really created a explosion of information for all of us, and I think that's what makes us really good, and I think that's what makes us valuable to a lot of different settings. So, teaching that class, one of the students, I got great evaluations from the students, but one of the students made a comment that that Carolyn Greer not only helped us learn how to administrate in athletic training, but she taught us how to be an athletic trainer. And I thought that was really neat for someone I never saw face to face. It was all via Zoom. And I told the students, I said, yeah, you feel far behind in that area of experience, hands-on skills, but every other program in the country is the same. So you're not behind anyone else. And these kids, it's still undergrad, they've got 1 more year, and they're getting grad assistantships because schools need them. So they're getting into graduate school and getting grad assistantships, and they'll get, like me, thrown into the fire, and they've got the book smarts. They really do. These kids are smart. So.
For sure. All right, going back a little bit more to your history at USD. Mm-hmm. I'd just like to toss this one. Tell me a couple of your favorite memories.
Wow, that's hard. Favorite memories at USD. Maybe not favorite, but my first year during a football game, one of my football players dislocated his shoulder. Wow. And the team physician at the time was I'm not sure what his specialty was. I don't remember. But he was like, well, okay, go ahead and reduce it. And I had watched Bob Moore do that. I knew how to do that, but I was so nervous because this was my first big injury to deal with on the sidelines. And so I was working with the athlete, and one of my students actually looked at me, Dave Borum, and he just went, "Just relax," to me. And I went, "You're right, okay." And I did, and it's, seamlessly reduced the shoulder, but I learned a big lesson on that one. And the lesson was, and I when I taught emergency action plan in the fall, I was saying that you have to one of the things is you have to be so practiced and so good at what you do that any outside distraction is not going to bother you. So if someone gets hurt on the field, no matter it's a sold out arena or it's national TV, it's you and that athlete, and you have to be able to get rid of all those distractions and focus. So that was kind of an early lesson. With football, those first couple of years, the referees just did not know what to do with me, and would order me off the field and ask where my doc or the AT was, and I had to learn right away, early on, to stand my ground. That's my athlete, So if you fast forward, we had a game in men's basketball at San Diego State in the 90s, and our best player ruptures his Achilles tendon, and I'm out on the court with him, and the basketball athletic trainer just comes up and he starts firing questions. Do you need a doc? Do you need a gurney? Do you need that? And I just looked at him and I said, not now, like that. And the crowd went crazy, of course, because we were the visiting team.
Yeah.
And the thing with that was he tried to steal my energy. He tried to steal my focus. And some people say I actually pushed him. I don't have that recollection, but that was kind of a fun story in hindsight. As an athletic trainer, celebrating their wins and losses, playing St. Mary's at our gym in 1984, and if we win the game, we go to the NC2As, the first time in history, and the gym was packed, and it was hot, and kids broke in, and I'm sure a lot of fire laws were broken that day. But the crowd was loud and electric, and we won the game, and it was like the most exciting thing, to experience with them. And that's something with the athletes. It's, you have to do your job, but you celebrate their seasons, you celebrate their wins, you're sad with their losses, but, there's always those few things. And then one of my ex-athletic trainers is a men's basketball athletic trainer for UConn, Final Four experience. He's been there. Before he was at UConn, he was at Wyoming as the basketball athletic trainer. So I've stayed in contact with him for a number of years. And so we're playing them in the first round of the NC2As in 2004, I believe. And so we're playing them in the NC2As in Florida. And one of their best players snapped his Achilles. Oh no, he tore his ACL right under our basket. So I was right there and I knew it. And I don't go out there, of course, but I'm watching them, and so after the game I said, James, so how's your athlete's ACL? And he's like, you saw that? I'm like, you didn't even have to do a Lockman on that. But the fun part of it was seeing my ex-student at Wyoming and then at UConn for basketball games, and watching him on the sidelines and seeing how this young man has developed into a professional, and you could see the respect and love from the athletes to him and the coaches, and I felt so proud of him and what he had accomplished. But he was just inducted into the Connecticut Hall of Fame, and when I sent him a card, I just said, I'm still 2-0 against you, because we won at Wyoming as well as UConn. So,
nice, cool.
And football, going Division I and getting into our first NC2A playoff was, something for a non-scholarship Division I program is great. And then when we won at Cal Poly, it was just really neat to see, just the evolution of what's gone on at USD. And then also with that is, the inclusion of adding women's teams and the success of our women's teams, and our volleyball program is so successful. And these women from, 40 years ago to now, and the men, they're all just so smart and fit and good at what they do. It's just really neat to watch that evolution. When Title IX passed, I was living in Menlo Park, California, and I was a gymnast for a private gymnastics club. And as most, probably individuals, period, you know, and the age I was, you really didn't know a lot about Title IX and what it meant. And the impact it would have on women going forward. And I think over the evolution of time, you know, I was able to witness how some of that has changed. So when I graduated from high school and I went to San Diego State as an intercollegiate gymnast, we were AIAW. Okay. So when I went to San Diego State as a gymnast, we were AIAW, American Intercollegiate Association of Women Athletes. But so that was our classification. So when I went to nationals, it was AIAW nationals. It wasn't NC2A. So, you know, Title IX had passed, but we were still separate from what the men were doing with that. I really don't remember the year we went from that to being in the NC2A, but I think that impacted how early on, just how we just got a glimpse of it. So when I was a gymnast, we didn't go in the ATR unless you did something like break your sternum, you know? So even though we were told we were welcome in there, you still knew it was the football training room in a lot of ways. So those opportunities, and scholarship-wise, I think in athletics, now that we're NC2A and they're trying to have gender equity with that, you know, scholarship-wise, you know, you had to be at state for a year or two, and then you may have gotten, as a female, a tuition waiver, which was $90 a semester. Okay, so that was interesting then. But then when I got to USD as a certified athletic trainer, we didn't have as many women's sports as we did men's sports. And so I watched, my second year was the first year of women's basketball at USD. And then so we added women's basketball. 79, they added it, okay, fall of 79.
So it took 7 years, really, from it passing to starting a new sport.
At USD, yeah. So then it was another, and I don't recall what year it was, we added women's soccer about 7 or 8 years after that, okay? But you looked at it, and men's soccer could play in the stadium, but women's soccer had to play on the Manchester field, which is a practice field, okay? We called it Canyon Field. So, you know, we were adding these sports. I don't remember what the scholarship division was, but, you know, they still, well, the men had to wait so many years to play in the stadium, so did the women. But as it evolved, the department realized that, you know, we do have to give equal opportunity. And so then, you know, things like both men's and women's soccer playing in the stadium along with football was started. God, let's think.
I can help spark some questions here for you.
Yeah.
So that's great learning more about how it progressed at USD. What was the sentiment from other athletic trainers, male athletic trainers at that time, of females being introduced into the athletic training room? Did they like it? Did they not like it?
Since when I started at USD, I was one of the first, okay, female head athletic trainers in Division I. And so it was unusual, to say the least, okay? So as I said earlier, when we talked about going to games, UC Berkeley, men's basketball game, I get there and the locker room, to get to the men's basketball locker room, you had to go through the men's athletic training room to get down there. Well, I wasn't allowed to go through the training room to get to the locker room. So I was escorted outside around to the fire exit to get into the the athletic training room. The locker room for my team, so I can get them ready. So a lot of places, they were so segregated, you know, they didn't have a facility that could handle having a female athletic trainer. And so on the road, a lot of places your visiting team locker room was in the middle of someone else's locker room or locker room area. So you learned really quickly how to just tape ankles with your head down, you know, and you acted like a professional, and you got the job done. At Berkeley that year, it was funny because, okay, I'm getting ready, we're going out to warm up, and they're ready to escort me around the building and onto the floor. I'm like, no, no, just followed my team up, and you get the looks and all of that. So, yeah, it was.
Took a lot of courage.
Pardon?
It took a lot of courage to do that.
Well, it was, yeah, I guess it did, but it was important to me to, like, this is my job, and you're stopping me from doing my job, you know? Even my last couple years at USD, I traveled football. It was 2 certified athletic trainers and a student, okay, for a football game away. And we would get to a field, and the athletic trainer I would travel with was Joe Perry, who was over 6 feet tall and well over 200 pounds and a big, imposing man. So the natural was the athletic trainer, always a male, would walk up and introduce himself to Joe, because Joe obviously was going to be the head, right? And so, but Joe was great. He would, nice to meet you. This is Carolyn, our head athletic trainer, you know. So he was great with it, but it was, you know, it's something that still, women as a head in the NCAA Division I is still less than 10%, you know. And so you have respect for individuals like Sally Nogle, who came from San Diego State University, and she's the head athletic trainer at Michigan State. And she really, I mean, glass broken everywhere with her. So.
Yeah, I hope that'd be cool to fly to go interview her, man.
It would be really cool. Yeah.
One day. Okay, sweet. And did you ever feel any pushback from when traveling and you had to assert yourself as I'm the head athletic trainer for this? Was there any pushback from any coaches or other athletic trainers or referees?
I talked a little bit about that, you know.
They kind of give you a hard time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But one of my last years at USD, we were in the middle of a conference game, and it's a timeout, and one of the refs comes over and gets a cup of water, and he goes, you know, at our West Coast Conference meetings this year, we talked about you as being the best athletic trainer in the West Coast Conference. So I thought that was a really big compliment, you know. Of course, they had seen me for like 40 years, so, but it was neat that they noticed that, so.
Yeah, I definitely think you were one of the pioneers for women athletic training down here, and I think really helped evolve this whole area. I think your influence really helped. So.
One of the things, as I got more staffing at USD, I wanted to give them opportunity. So as I did sport assignments for my staff, whatever the number was, I tried to make sure they all had a men's sport, all had a women's sport. So they got that experience working with both men's and women's teams. I thought that was really important, and different administrative duties. So
because it is different working with the two genders. You know?
It's different. It's different. But you're still an athletic trainer, you know, with that. So as a newly certified athletic trainer, remember, you have passed the minimum standards to become certified. Okay? It's a process to get from point A to where you want to be, no matter what that process is. When I taught PNF at State this past semester, one of the students asked me, okay, we know all this stuff. How do we know when to use it? How do we know how to progress an athlete? And I said, a lot of that is experience, but a lot of that is being engaged with your athlete during the rehab process. And you give him or her something to do, and you should be able to evaluate with your eyes, is this too easy or is this too difficult? And you immediately, either advance it or regress that so you can see them. And as you're working with them, you'll see the progression. So that is something I think in rehab. The other thing is emergency action plan. Know what it is. If where you are doesn't have one, you develop it. And then with you, if you have a staff or not, and your coaches, everyone practice, practice, practice. Because again, if you're out there and have to make that decision, whether to start CPR or not, okay, your focus is going to be there. And if you're well practiced in your emergency care, then it's going to be just reflex, and you're not going to freeze, and I think that's one of the things that you're afraid of, is I tell the students, your head's on a swivel, you're at practice, it's like November of football season, you are bored to tears, but you have to have your head on the swivel because you never know the split second something will happen, so you have to stay engaged. So
I remember we always used to say, play out situations in your head and how you handle it if you're bored.
So, yeah, and that's right. You have scenarios in your head, and you think, what would I do if? So right now at USD, JC is still driving the bus with teens. JC is in his 80s. So whenever I'd get on the bus, I'd think, all right, if JC is driving, okay, and he goes down, my plan was to go to the front of the bus, rip his sorry ass off the seat, and drive the bus to the side. I got to save everyone, and then if we have time, we work with JC. But that's, even teaching CPR, you're teaching CPR, and the first thing is seen as safe, and then responsiveness. Well, we've got to teach also seen as safe, what else is going on? Because if let's say you're working hockey and they got a skate to the neck and they're bleeding profusely, you're going to deal with the bleeding because they're going to die from that before you're going to deal with the CPR. So there's so many things that you have to make scenario based and worst case scenario and how would I handle it. So.
Yeah, totally. That's crazy. That's great advice for sure.
Wait, one more thing.
Yeah.
Is administratively be on top of everything that's going on in your department and be on top of the policies and procedures of your department and your setting, okay, as well as keeping up to date with one of the best resources athletic trainers have is the NATA website. There is so much information on there. And if you utilize that to your advantage, you will be able to be well versed in all those things that you need to know.
Perfect.
All right, I'll shut up.
No, good. How did you have the work-life balance? How did you have time to have the family and take leave and take care of the kids?
Okay.
And that's another part of athletic training.
Yeah,
I think
is really critical right now. Yeah.
It's difficult to achieve. So how did you?
Yes. My first 9 years at USD, it was just me. So I did not have a staff other than my students to help. So during that 9 years, I got married and I had David and Jason, or maybe Jason came right after that. So for 9 years, it was just me. So when I did go on maternity leave for 3 months, we hired Vicki Cutting, who was also an ex-gymnast, but got certified through the state program, and she filled in for me. But how did I do that? And that's a question a lot of people ask because my husband has a demanding job also. I had no help, I had children, and I had a job with a lot of responsibility. So I think a couple things. Number one, we had a great support system with my husband and then with his family that lived in town, so they would help him when I would be on the road. But with that, as a mother, I mean, you have this overwhelming responsibility to your family. And so, I mean, I would get home from work and it would be, in the early days, with the baby and feeding and changing and bathing and reading the books and all that, to then they're in elementary school and the homework and helping with all of that. It was just, I feel like it was a sprint, like, as the sun rose and set. I mean, every day was a sprint, whether I was at home or at work. But it worked because also I wanted it to so badly. I really loved what I did, and I loved my family, and I wanted both to work. So I don't know how much sleep I got during those days. I see some pictures and my eyes look so tired. But it was something that I really wanted to accomplish, and we have support to help with that. But it's not for everybody, It's you've got to do what works for you.
Yeah.
Because I wanted things to work so well, I was very hard on myself. But every time I had something happen, whether work or home, I would evaluate it and figure out what could I have done better. And also be able to admit your mistakes and learn from them. And that's what athletic trainers, especially new ones, have to do, is you learn from your mistakes, but you also learn from the mistakes of others. So an example is that dislocated shoulder. I knew what to do, but I had anxiety doing it. So then I had to go in my mind and go back and practice and practice and practice. And so that was, something that I think made me better at work. And I never stepped down from a challenge at work, whether it was from a coach. I stood up for myself with coaches and with administrators. The newest AD at USD, when I met with him the first time, it was after he met with the coaches, and he said, the coaches say that it's your way or the highway. I said, well, they're right when it comes to medical decisions. So they're right. They might not like it, but they don't have a choice with that. So that was good. My, raising the family didn't come without stress. And I remember picking Jason up one day, and you're feeling guilty at work because you're not home. You're feeling guilty at home because you're not at work, and all that stress. And so one time I'm driving, and my 7-year-old's in the back seat, and I'm on the verge of tears, and I just went, Jason, should I quit my job? And he said, Mom, you have a really cool job. And I'm like, oh, okay, he's all right with it, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever bring your kids into the athletic training room and have them hang out?
Oh, yes. They weren't there all the time. I was not one of those parents, but they did get to come to the ATR maybe, on a weekend practice or game. I took both boys different years to Kansas for a men's basketball game so they could experience that chaos in that packed stadium. So that was fun for them. I took them to Italy with our men's basketball team, so they got international travel experience. But as they were little, I remember David, my older one, Hank Egan was our basketball coach, and Hank loved my kids. So Hank would be pacing the sidelines of practice, and sometimes hands on his hips or hands behind his back and screaming at the athletes. And David would just mimic him, hands on the hips, hands behind the back, and just it was really neat for them to see. And I think it was really good for them to see me working with a diverse population of men and women and all races, all cultures. And that was really good for them to see that was part of my life, and a good example. So.
Awesome. Cool. And let me see here. So I have a lot of questions.
That's all right, because you're going to cut out
of course
7/8 of this. So.
No. I like to keep it as much as true as
yeah.
As conversation as we're having. As years went on, were there a couple things you wish you would have done more efficiently or better?
Right. In hindsight, being the head athletic trainer at USD, I was 9 years by myself, and then I got one assistant. I was 15 years being on a 10-month appointment, even though I did work 12 months, because as the head, you have to get ready for the fall. In hindsight, And now when I left, I had a staff of 6 athletic trainers. So, not enough for today's standards of what is appropriate coverage for your intercollegiate athletes. But when you started with nothing, I learned that. I think that in hindsight, I would have fought harder for myself and my staff to get things that employees deserve. And that's, similar to what we talked about earlier with saying no sometimes. I had the belief, and I would still do this, but that my job was to find a way to get it done. Maybe I should have said no more, but I never made my staff do anything I would never do. And there were very few things. One of them was practicing on Christmas Day. We're at Catholic University. I am not working Christmas Day. So then one year, our women's basketball coach wanted to have practice on Christmas Day, and the athletic trainer was not happy about it. And I said, "You're not covering it." Okay, and I went to the AD and I said, "We are not working at practice on Christmas Day. We work every other day of the year." So again, it was because I wouldn't do it. I don't expect my staff to do it. Just like cleaning the whirlpool, or wiping the tables, or emptying the trash. There's no one in that department that's above doing that. And one of the things about Hank Egan, our former basketball coach, was here's a man that went to Naval Academy, and he was head coach at Air Force Academy and now at USD. And I watched him. He treated everyone with respect, whether it was a custodian in his office or it was the president of the university or a big corporation. And that's something that I think is really important for everyone to do, regardless of your status.
Last words of wisdom you want to give to the district?
To the district? Okay. Okay, let me think. I think the opportunities for athletic trainers right now is phenomenal. There are so many different things that you can do with your certification and your degree, and you're valuable in so many different workplaces. So don't be satisfied with your first job, okay? Unless you love it, unless it's exactly what you wanted. Gary Vitti had great message for the athletic training students when he spoke to my class. And he said, how many in this class want to be an NBA or an NFL athletic trainer? And of course there were some. And he said, don't count on it. And I think that kind of shocked them, because others would say, follow your passion, do this or that. But you don't know what opportunities are going to come up. And so Gary Vitti, his opportunity came up because when he was at University of Utah as a grad assistant, the Jazz practiced there. And so he got to know people. So you don't, every opportunity you have to make an impression or to meet someone or reach out to these possible mentors, do it. Tori Lindley, president of the NATA, he spoke to my class, and here's my email. Reach out to me. And I told the class, reach out, because then people start remembering your name, right? Okay, and you might not get that job, but you might get that interview, So keep in touch with your mentors, reach out to opportunities, and don't burn a bridge, So,